Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Irish Goodbye Business Podcast. Today, we're with Reid Hansen from MarketSurge IO. Reid is somebody I know a little while now and has an incredibly familiar and inspiring story. So we're going to get into that today and talk to Reid about how he has kind of come to marketing from landscaping and a big meandering path in the middle. So, Reid, please say hello to everybody.
Hello, and I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Carl. I really enjoy the premise of what you have, and I'm excited to dive in.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining. And perhaps to get us all started, you give us a little sort of brief 2 minutes of kind of where you are, what it is you do, and maybe a little bit of how you started, and then we can fill in the gaps in the conversation.
Yeah, you bet. So as you mentioned, I own a marketing agency where we have a remote team. We're not huge, but we do service about 75 clients in a variety of industries with SEO, ads management, and marketing campaigns. Now, before that, I think my journey started when I was very young. My dad took me to work at his landscaping business, which was a great experience. I think at the time I just really resented not being able to play with my friends in the evenings and weekends, but it really was formative. And I went to college and worked in actually software sales for many years. And gradually, each step of the way, I found pieces that I liked and didn't like about each job. Finally, had an opportunity at age 42 to acquire an agency, and I jumped on it because that's apparently like something I've always wanted to do, and I'm really enjoying it.
Wow. So you software sales to acquiring an agency, that's a leap. So we might need a little stepping stone in there in the middle.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, and to put a finer point on it, so I left out a couple things. I'm a Mormon guy, and I served a mission in Italy, majored in Italian, and thought, man, I'm going to go back and work in Italy. And that wasn't really in the cards. It's very tricky. I mean, I'm speaking to somebody that's had this experience. Very tricky to work internationally, and especially when you're starting out, you don't have maybe a skill set. And so software sales, an opportunity opened for me, and I worked first at a startup and then at Oracle. So big contrast between those two settings. And then, but was pretty successful at both. I went to get an MBA, and right after the MBA, sure enough, I found myself right back at Oracle. And I mean, there's little twists and turns in the story, but I did eventually get the opportunity to work at two digital marketing agencies as a sales executive.
Okay.
And in both of those companies, I got laid off, and so I worked for Northwestern University in what is the equivalent of a sales role at a university. So I was selling executive training programs with the faculty there.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, my wife had started a photo studio, and I was helping her with some marketing tasks. And in any case, this opportunity popped up. A friend of ours who we'd worked with, I say we because I was helping my wife with the marketing, and he was wanting to exit and gave us the first opportunity to acquire the agency, and so we took it. Yeah. So
had you worked with marketing platforms in Oracle? Because I've done my tour of duty in Oracle. I think we all have.
Okay. Yeah.
For sales. So.
A bit, yeah. I did mostly
Marketo or what responses or.
Yeah, I wish I had done more of that. Obviously I was like using the Siebel system, which was
right,
and then but I was selling middleware primarily, and then when I came back, I was selling the big data appliance in Deca.
I know.
And that. Honestly, I don't know how it's doing now, but that was kind of a dud, and it was.
Well, Oracle's their prices have surged, or their stock has surged. Sorry.
Oh yeah. Then they just signed a deal with, was it OpenAI just like this week or?
Yeah, their stock went up 36% this week.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Insane. There's something that's very timely there in what you discussed, and thank you for sharing that kind of brief overview of your journey. But there's something that I think is very timely, and it wasn't really anything we discussed before we came in, but you said you've been let go twice or made redundant twice, which is something that a lot of people are going through now. Is there, when you face that, is there any sort of mindset or any, well, first, how did you get over the grief and then the doubt and then the why was I chosen? And then how did you kind of pick yourself up and get on with it again?
Yeah, so I joined this marketing agency at the time. It was called Solstice, and it has gone through a series of acquisitions, as many agencies does. So it doesn't exist anymore in that form. But I joined this company. I had left Oracle because, as I mentioned, this Endeca software was just really hard to sell. It was just, I was not enjoying that work. So I found this opportunity with this marketing agency. They were doing great. And, but for me, it was going to be a little bit of a transition from selling a software to selling a service and understanding how apps are developed and really how advertising works, all these pieces. So they took a chance on me, and I was learning. I made a lot of progress, but I wasn't selling a lot. But the nature of those deals were that they'd be large and infrequent. And so I was kind of holding on to hope that, I had like some bits and pieces, small sales along the way. But honestly, like after about 2 years, I hadn't really sold, I was like barely selling more than my salary. And so like in one sense it was somewhat deserved, but honestly I was let go on Wednesday and told that I was going to be, we'd do some handoff and but on Friday I had my first 2 large deals were scheduled to close that same week. And so I was just like, I remember meeting with this new VP of sales, and I'm like, I'm getting there. I'm like, on Friday I've got 2, like one was like $125,000 deal, and another was a $75,000 deal, approximately. And I was like, I'm getting there. I'm like, I'm doing this. And he looked at me and he's like, I don't know. I mean, it's been 2 years, and I don't know if this really matters. And I'm like, and in my mind I was just kind of like dumbfounded, but in a way he was right. But I was like, man, maybe it should, maybe I was just like, felt so undeserved.
Well, first off, let me commend you on the honesty of your reflection, right? Because I've been fired from a couple of jobs or let go from a couple of jobs. One was software engineering long ago. And it took me a long time to be honest about why I was let go because I wasn't any good.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it was, they were wrong, the systems are wrong, this is wrong, and my attitude was always wrong. On the flip side, when you're working with, like, I work with, strategic enterprise size accounts, average deal size is 20 months, or deal time. And there's not everybody that can, and I include managers as well as reps in this, not everybody can sit by and watch somebody slowly move that needle for 20 months. They want these big gains all the time, and that's not how this game works. It's winning trust, it's understanding issues, it's providing solution. And I think if we all did that a little more, not just in work but in life, we'd actually do a lot better. Rather than trying to push an agenda, actually listen to people about the solution they're trying to solve for, regardless of whether it's business or personal life. So your honest reflection there is incredible. But coming out of that, what would you say is how'd you get from the woe is me to, right, whoa, let's get on this horse again and go back after it?
Yeah. I was fortunate that I actually, in my mind, I felt like I had made some progress, like I was starting to grasp the industry. And the other thing too, is I had a young family, and, I felt compelled to support them and not like wallow. And, like I had to do something. And I was like, the quickest path to making money again was to get back on the horse and do sales again. And, what an opportunity came up fairly quickly, like within 6 weeks or so, to work for a competitor. Now, this competitor wasn't doing as well. And they, and actually I had a lot of insight from this first company that I could bring to the new company. But, it was tough. I was, I think, kind of wrecked inside, and my self-esteem was really low, but I just decided, like, I have to earn for my family. I'm going to put on some bluster, and I'm going to go into these interviews very confident. And, and it worked. And I guess I was just kind of like almost borrowing on future success to keep me going, and like in the hope of future success, if that makes sense.
It really does. But I think where I'm trying to go with this is, where did you find that inner confidence? Because I think, and this is what I'm trying to draw for the audience here, this is what I think people sometimes lack. They get that gut punch. And I know how I've done it, but this is your story. Like, tell me how you get up, you dust yourself off, and you walk back in thinking of future success. And I love that you said you were able to take your knowledge from A to B. Yeah. So please include that.
Yeah. So, well, as I'm thinking deeper, I go back in time. My father's landscaping business also was not like a great success, and eventually he had to close that. And I know he really enjoyed the work. It was more like a landscape architecture business. He was kind of like a designer type of, but he, I just remember from my youth, he immediately jumped into working in a factory, and he worked the swing shift to keep, to earn some money when there's space in between payments. And so he was, often working like 18 hours a day, that poor guy. But he kept at it, and eventually, like, he made a career in manufacturing. And, but I would just remember that he did everything in his power to keep like food on the table. And he just felt like a real responsibility. Now, and right or wrong, I come from like kind of a traditional background. Right or wrong, I was like, I'm the man of the house, I'm the father. I've got like my main purpose is I've got to provide for my family. And, and I had that example to follow. I think that was just something I was like, I'm just going to grit my way through this.
I can relate so much. I have a father who was made redundant at 50 and got back up and just didn't miss a beat. But at least as a kid watching him, he didn't miss a beat. And it's given me all of the ambition I have in life. I have this phrase to say to my parents: my father, with his endeavor, he gave me all his ambition, and my mother, with always being there and having a loving household, gave me all of my confidence. And I do think and I'm saying this I do think as men, because I can't speak for a woman, right? Yeah. So I'm not excluding them from this point. I do think as men that if we have a really good visual role model of what getting on with life is like, we tend to do it.
Yeah.
And, here's to the fathers and the mothers out there, or the uncles or the aunts or whoever it is in your life. If there's somebody out there who just is somebody you'd like to emulate, one, don't wait till it's too late to tell them. And two, do what we're doing. Ask them how.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think there's a lot of people that are heroic in that way. You said mothers, fathers, that just, they trade off maybe some aspirations or like a level of comfort in their career to like really care for a family or a spouse that, for whatever reason. And I agree. I commend them. I think that's a very powerful example. Something to look at.
Changing slightly, maybe adding a bit more sort of levity to it. Yeah. Is there any job along the way that you had that nobody would believe or that's just odd to the lineage of your career? And what did it teach you? You've already mentioned doing your Mormon service in Italy. I mean, that's a tough sell. Selling Mormonism to Roman Catholics in Italy. I mean, that's talking about going against the grain there.
Right. Well, and no surprises in that story that, we didn't baptize any time. I was there for 2 years, and, occasionally somebody that was new to Italy, non-Italian speaker, from Africa, Asia, or South America would join, but it was definitely an exercise in futility. And actually, I do think it did build a lot of whether callous or resilience for the no's that you inevitably get in business and sales. And I think that was valuable to, just keep going after you get no's, and just pick yourself back up, because quitting yields the same results. At least you're trying. And so yeah, and I'd say like another unusual job I had was I've worked in a series of running shoe stores as a running shoe salesman, and there are actually there's some specialized knowledge I have about running shoes and how to diagnose gait and strike pattern to diagnose, and every once in a while it'll come up. I'm not like a major runner now, but I like I'll walk by like a shoe display at a sporting goods store, and I know like way too much, and it feels like very useless knowledge. I'll be like, oh, I remember that model from 20 years ago.
Or you'll watch somebody run, and you go, oh, you need to correct the gait.
Exactly. Oh, that's not a symmetrical. That's not a symmetrical arm movement. Oh no.
So has this knowledge completely gone to waste, or is there something that from it that like a question that gets you into deeper conversation from it? Like I would imagine, because running is such a personal thing, that it allowed you to build personal questions and translating that into marketing, which is truly about feeling. Yeah. That they do go hand in hand.
I do think, it's the experience of working in retail in that manner, and a little bit of like specialized retail where I had to ask a lot of questions and diagnose. Now, I'm a natural introvert. I love that, like in the Irish Goodbye, we talk about like leaving parties, covertly. I mean, that's totally my move. But and so like working in retail was important, formative experience for me to be able to really communicate and, like take people's answers seriously. Like how to field complaints from an angry client, and and that kind of hospitality, I think, served me well in relationships and definitely in my career.
Yeah. One thing I love about having to kind of get down to what's personal with somebody, and then there's nothing more personal than clothing or a shoe.
Yeah.
It's the first answer is often a symptom of the true problem. So you have to ask multiple questions.
Yeah.
And this made me way better in my career by, say, in software sales, somebody saying, we don't have reporting. I know people who go, we do reporting. And then he's like, it's a data issue. Come on, ask the questions. You'll find out it's a data issue.
Right.
Yeah. So as that translates into marketing, before we actually get into the marketing, can you tell me a little bit about MarketSurge?
Yeah. So MarketSurge, the company was formed in 2021 and was primarily built on the selling CRM technology, using the Go High Level technology. You're probably familiar with that, and they'd white labeled it. And so in large part with the connection with my wife. So, we've been kind of part of this, whether officially or unofficially, for a long time. And we ended up landing a lot of photography studios as clients, and we built workflows for them and applied those to new installs as they came on board. So I learned a ton about the variety of problems that photography studios face with their marketing, but as I acquired the company in April of last year, I wanted to expand the service offering. I just thought that if we were only doing CRM, we were not helping them get more leads through ads or email campaigns, and we weren't helping, or even organic leads with their website. So I kind of filled out those gaps, and now we'll have engagements where we do multiple services for a lot of clients, and we're not just like a software provider that does support. So that's been a bit of a journey, in large part because I had to kind of educate myself on a lot of these things. Like I saw a need, I wasn't necessarily like the expert at it, and so I had to train myself on the job. But that's something I really enjoy, and didn't surprise me in an entrepreneurial role that would be part of it. So yeah, that's but today we just have a very robust offering. I have a lot of partners that are great at what they do, and so when we provide this portfolio, we're the face of it, and we do have a lot of partners that do the technical work behind the scenes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, as you know, here on the Irish Goodbye, or perhaps this week the Mormon Goodbye, we love taking sort of the best or the worst advice we've got. And so give me the worst advice you ever got in your career. Did you take it? And if it did, what did you learn from it, to perhaps not do again?
Yeah. I remember, I don't know exactly where I got this, but in some of my early jobs, I had this mantra in my head. I was going to be working with customers, whether it's at the shoe store or in sales, that the customer is always right. And, and that just kind of echoed in my head whenever there'd be a difficult situation with a customer, that I would affirm what they were saying, and maybe, give supportive arguments, and just nod my head and say, oh, yes, that's right. And I think over time I have evolved to care less about agreement with clients and more about the actual problem solving part of whether it's sales or marketing, that process. Like I have to frequently push back on my clients. They'll say, it doesn't look good, or it doesn't look the way I want it to. And it's like, well, why do you want it to look like that? And what are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to achieve a button on your webpage in just a certain place just because, or are we trying to achieve conversions, for instance? And just like you say, often going back to what is the source of the problem, or what is the need we're trying to fill. And I think that should really go by the wayside. Just the customer is not always right, and I would say there's a lot of unreasonable customers out there. So another aspect is sometimes it's okay to part ways with the customer if they are so burdensome or constantly challenging that it's not a productive connection.
100%.
Yeah.
And every customer thinks now that they're ultimately the be all and end all of negotiation.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just go somewhere else. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So, but that's a skill in itself. So how do you take telling somebody that you don't agree with them? Not that they're wrong, because I would think the truth's in the gray anyway.
Yeah.
So how do you go from not agreeing with somebody, one, strongly enough to get your point across, two, politely enough that they're not hurt, and three, establish why you find it, and within your own realm. I'm not asking you to solve, like, if talking to an architect and why a building should look a particular way. Yeah. But if you're talking to somebody about a platform that you're implementing for them, and especially when you said you're dealing with a lot of photographers, creatives often have an image in their mind that they can capture themselves but can't necessarily convey to another.
Right.
So how do you take those multifaceted conversations and weave those into a reality and an actionable output? Because I think that's a story in itself. It's a skill in itself. Yeah.
Well, so there's a couple ways I've gone about this, because when I first acquired the agency and we're selling a white labeled CRM, like so we have very little control over the product itself. So we're essentially a reseller, and we can help support. We can do custom workflows and automations and builds within the limits of the software. And in that sense, we weren't well positioned to actually do what I was saying, and that always kind of bothered me. Well, and even just going back, it's tough in sales to have that stance, because ultimately you're trying to close the deal, and then you hand it to a delivery team or a support team. But as a marketer, now I'm both selling and delivering, and like, we're gonna have to live with this relationship. And so I quickly recognized that there were going to be some challenges with this approach. And that was part of the impetus for adding additional services, where we could, because they'd say like, oh, my ads guy is telling me that it should work this way. And I'm like, well, okay, so I'm kind of like the order taker in this situation, and just don't have any, like authority. And so I was like, I've got to reposition myself as like credible and authoritative and consultative. And so I started making some educational content and sharing that with my clients. I attempted to create a Facebook group where I was going to share blogs and thoughts, and that was quite unsuccessful, unfortunately. But and then I started expanding our offering. So I was just trying to just do more, and like, maybe we could encompass, like, have this relationship with some new clients we added, or expand the relationship. And it's been kind of a gradual process. But what started working well, and this is more of a tactical point, is the approach was right. But when we started publishing a weekly newsletter where I was sharing these insights, that's where people started reaching back out and said, oh, I didn't know you did this. And, can we talk about like how I could solve this problem? And, so we I have basically a full-time employee that is distributing these, creating these newsletters. We have actually a few niche newsletters and a main one. So
that's the difference maker, Reed, is you put yourself out there and you created more value.
Yeah.
Right. So it's nothing your product did over another product. Look, I'm at Salesforce currently. I was at Oracle, right? I've lived CRM for 20 years, right? So there's expensive and smooth and plugs into everything and does everything and automates. And people say, oh, my ad guy said it works this way, because the ad guy's used to working with Eloqua or Marketo or something, right? And he knows the API plugs right in, and there you go. Or you've free and clunky, right? And you've everything in between. Yeah. So for someone to say, well, this guy says it should work that way, but then just creating that value add and the educational aspect of it. The reason I'm stopping here is I don't think you should gloss over that so easily. That's the differentiator. That's what differentiates you from other people, and that's what we're about here. That's the mindset right there. That's the piece. And if anybody takes away anything from this, if they're a small business and they're trying to create that differentiation, you've just shown one very key way of doing it.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and the results have been great. It's but it feels like real. Like there's been a shift in our relationship with many of my clients.
You're a consultant now as well as a product.
Exactly.
A trusted advisor, right?
Right. And it is the thing is I am not. I mean, I do have an MBA. I do, for what that's worth. I don't think the education in an MBA is actually all that hard to acquire in other ways. But I mostly just school of hard knocks, like working at some different companies and being in the sales room a lot. But it is interesting. It's almost more about effort and empathy, more so than actual expertise, to become that trusted advisor.
Effort and empathy. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think empathy is what's missing a lot. Yeah. Somebody's coming to you, they have a problem, and if you don't appear empathetic to it, I don't think they will ever think that you understand it fully. Right. Because by the time they come to you, They don't go, oh, here's a problem, race to read. By the time they get to you, they've tried a couple of things already.
Right.
They try to fix it internally. It's now cost money, time, frustration, heartache, and whatever else, right? So I love that you identify empathy. I always say selling is listening with integrity and acting with empathy.
Yeah, that's a great way to sum it up. Yeah.
So coming through all of that, is there a belief or a mindset that you've always had? Like you kind of touched on it earlier when you are talking about having been laid off and just picking yourself back up,
Yeah.
and perhaps even seeing your father. But is there a belief or a mindset or a mantra that you've carried through that keeps you going when Monday morning looks dark and bleak, or Friday afternoon and you're still busy and you want to go see the kid?
Yeah. Well, so I do have a mantra. I don't know that it's actually actionable, but it's alliterative, so it's really helpful. When I was, I had a 2-year-old daughter, and we were trying to get her out the door. She was saying, our family is always in a rush. She didn't want to get her shoes on. We're always in a rush, and I said, in our family, Hansens can do hard things. And she actually just started repeating that. And, and so it kind of stuck with me.
Right.
I think she liked that it kind of, it had a rhythm to it. And she'd repeat it. And so it's cute to see a 2-year-old saying that, but I just keep that in my head, that I shouldn't not do something because it's hard. I don't shy away from tasks because they're difficult. And, that if it is of value, it is worth doing, regardless of, how hard it is. And, I sometimes I just repeat that self when I have a bad interaction with a client, or, lose a client, or, I just repeat that, it's like, I believe that this will be worth it in the end. I like this job. I like this business, and this setback is just another hard thing, and I'm going to keep going forward. So yeah, for what it's worth, I always tell myself, Hansen's going to do hard things.
I love the positivity of it. If you can, myself and my colleague who runs this podcast with me, we talk about being surrounded by positivity, because negativity is, in Ireland, we have a phrase, misery loves company.
Right.
If you're miserable, people sit around and be miserable with you all day long.
Yes.
But positivity, to me, is as infectious as negativity. And if you're the summation of the 5 people closest to you, so if 2 of those are negative, you're going to be negative 40% of the time. So I love how positive your mantra is, and I might steal it. I'll either go. So look, we're going to start wrapping up here. So I have 2 more questions for you. And one is, with your marketing agency, what you've learned from your father, and what you've been through in terms of your career. Your career, kind of like mine, has taken a couple of cul-de-sacs and a couple of loop arounds, right? Yeah. And you mentioned your MBA, and a lot of people come out of school, going to college, come out of college, going to a job and die, and then the highway of life. I think the highway has on-ramps and off-ramps for a reason. So what would you say about people wanting to be themselves and put their own image on life? Fantastic. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And so this brings us to the wrap-up question. And the wrap-up question is always the same. As we're about to make our Irish goodbye and say goodbye to nobody, we're going to leave the bar, you with your glass of water, me my pint of Guinness, and we're going to write a note on a napkin to leave for the people who come behind us. And what's that piece of advice you'd write in that napkin? Well, Reid, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for your insights. A wonderful journey and an incredible person. So thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts, and have a big Irish goodbye from us. And please do come back and see us sometime.
Thank
All right, you take care now. Bye-bye.
you.